now we'll go to where's the participants? Yeah. Good morning. Good morning. Hello,
Hello.
Susie. Oh, good morning, Susie. How are you?
Good morning. How are you, Rabbi?
Good, thank God.
Thank God. Yeah, you're right. Amen. How was your
Okay.
birthday?
Oh, thank you for asking. Birthday was very nice. Thank God. It was a wonderful evening.
Oh, good.
And
Good.
in solidarity with you, we've all got our sweaters on today.
It's not as cold here down there as it is here.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
Very-
But at least I
very-
believe it's objectively cold here now. Would you be able to grab the door? Thank you.
That's if it
Yeah, I
goes
have a
under
friend in
70.
Billings, Montana that I have a running joke with. Whenever um, whenever anything happens with the weather, and so um, a few, I think around Rosh Hashanah time, he sent me or maybe it was Sukkot time. He sent me a screenshot. He said it's going to be 36 degrees here tomorrow. So I said here also, just here is going to be 36 Celsius.
36 Celsius. I mean, is he Jewish?
Yeah, he's a rabbi.
Oh, what is he doing in Billings? Are there any Jews out there?
That's what he's doing there. He's there to provide Jewish support and community for the Jews of
Oh,
Billings,
good.
Montana. Yeah,
I can't
in
imagine
northern Yellowstone.
that
He
there would
runs
be
a
any Jews.
Chabad up there.
Very interesting. I never thought there'd be many Jews that live such
Yeah, you'd
cold.
be surprised. I mean, also in Bluffton, South Carolina, we're everywhere.
Yeah, but at least we don't have snow and we don't have blizzards here, snow blizzards. So yeah.
Good. Okay, we'll jump right in. We will begin with the blessing that we make before we learn Torah, Baruch, Atah, Adonai, Eloheinu, Melech HaOlam, Asher Kiddushanu b'mitzvosav, v'tzivanu al divrei Torah. Yesterday, was everything? Oh, is that knock on the front door? Thank you, Chan. We'll wait just another moment. I'll make a blessing on my tea. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu, Melech HaOlam, Shakam Yavibar. Good morning, gentlemen. Okay, we're gonna jump right in.
How's Nakama doing?
Oh, today begins the 9th month, and thank God she's still doing well.
And what's her due date again? The 15th or something like that?
So depends how you count. It's either the 11th or the 14th.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah,
Must be excited.
somewhere around Hanukkah.
Yeah. Right. Perfect. Perfect.
Yep. Yesterday was a very special day in the Chabad calendar. Yesterday was the birthday of the fifth Rebbe of Chabad, the Rebbe Rashab, Rebbe Shalom Dov Ber. And we are going to learn a little bit about him as a young child, about who he was, and we're going to learn some messages from him, that pertain to children today and also to our own lives. A lesson in sensitivity and care. Are you guys ready? It's
Ready.
a beautiful class. It's not as deep as some of the classes we've had recently, and so it'll be an easier read.
What did the Rebbe appoint a successor? What?
That is a very good question. Why is there no eighth Rebbe of Chabad? Morning, morning. That is a very good question. Right? Didn't have any children. The short answer, and this can take many, many hours to unpack, but I personally feel and personally believe that he left each and every one of us as his successors. In the words of Lord Jonathan Sacks, Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, talking about the Rebbe, he said, a good leader makes followers. A great leader makes leaders. And the Rebbe didn't create followers, the Rebbe created leaders. But we can unpack that more on Yud Shivat. Like about a month after Hanukkah is the day that the Rebbe assumed the mantle of leadership and took on that responsibility of leading world Jewry, American Jewry, and Chabad. And we'll have a longer discussion about that then.
You would think logically, if he's going to name anyone, it'd be like one of those scribes that would take down his.
Right. He had many great disciples and many great people. I see you're very familiar with.
Well, you mentioned it on what.
I did mention it in one of the things a while ago. Yeah. Okay.
But there is a governing body, right? Council, city,
Debatable.
board of directors, something like that.
Officially, yeah.
So they could elect.
They would never. They would never. But now we're getting already into internal politics, which is much more complicated than.
There has to be somebody is.
Well,
it's a multinational, multi-billion-dollar company, corporation.
Correct.
So there has to be a chief executive officer somewhere makes the final decision.
And that would be the Rebbe. In other words, no one is going to make any. It has its goods and its bads, but no one's going to make any decisions that are not firmly rooted in things that the Rebbe has already decided on or spoken about.
Someone has to sign off on it.
Every Chabad does their own.
But well, okay, but what about the 770?
The building of 770?
The people
That's
in
a
there.
that's a sore topic. Who owns the building? They've been in court for
Yeah,
50
I know
years.
that. I mean, not the building itself. The corporation inhabiting the building. So they're just.
There are two corporations inhabiting the building.
So there's no central Chabad organization.
There is, but they in practical terms, other than providing certain resources and curriculums, it's like there's someone in.
If I make a
Chabad,
donation, if I go to Chabad's website, to your website,
Chabad.org,
I make a donation.
that donation.
Where does it go to?
Where does it go to? It's a good question. I don't know if it goes to the website, meaning the corporation that is in charge of the website, or if it would go to America's 302. So what is America's 302? We're getting a little bit off topic, but we'll get into it for a minute. And we'll have a longer discussion about this later. America's 302 is, I guess, what you would call the okay, let's put it a little bit different. Chabad on campus is very different branch than most Chabad branches. What I mean by that is that Chabad on campus is run very much as you would expect a corporation to run. There is a chief executive officer. There are guidelines and rules that are very, strictly adhered. Exactly. And except that they're not funded by Central, they have each Chabad on campus has to fund their own activities, which is very similar to every Chabad has to fundraise for the activities and the spaces, and everything is relying on local philanthropy. But there is certain guidelines and things that they're expecting, and growth patterns, and accountability to the higher ups in a way that is beautiful. Um, Most community Chabad will answer to their regional, what's called the head shliach. So let's say the head shliach of the state of Florida was Rabbi Avraham Korf of blessed memory, and he was succeeded by his son Rabbi Benji Korf, who is the head shliach for the state of Florida.
Where's he located?
He's in Miami. So what does that mean, practical level? I've had probably 2 or 3 conversations with him. He had to sign off on my contract um, when we took on this position. So we have a written contract, memorandum of understanding, whatever you want to call it, with the head rabbi of this area, which is Rabbi Lieberman, who's been down here since the 30s. And he and Rabbi Lieberman it basically answers to Rabbi Korf. But a practical day to day, unless there's anything that comes up in terms of disputes or anything between Chabads, then there's not really much. It's not like he's making big policies or doing things like that. Just everyone runs their own show how they see fit. And if there are issues, then people will step in. There is I guess you could call them the head of the outreach branch, which is that upstairs in 770 there are a number of suites and offices, and Suite 302 is what's called America's 302, and they are I guess in charge of the outreach branch of Chabad. And there are certain resources that they work on. For example, I believe that these materials are a project that is worked on by the Shluchim office, which is, I believe, answerable to America's 302. I may be giving some not good information over here, but I'm doing my best. Yeah, they have different things. For example, the big convention that's coming up next week, which I'm not going to be attending this year. That is arranged by America's 302 and various other things like that. But in terms of one person to have the end say about everything that happens in Chabad, that doesn't exist.
So somebody has to sign tax return.
Which tax return? America's 302 have their own tax returns that I'm sure they make, and their own employees. I file my own taxes for the Chabad, and yeah. So
does your pay come from national, from this?
no, my pay comes from what I have to fundraise for my salary.
Oh my
Part
God!
of the fundraising.
Just from what you fundraise?
Sorry?
Just from what you fundraise is what you sell?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh my! I've got to give
Yeah.
more.
So that's in a nutshell. That a very very brief nutshell. But okay. So now we will restart the class about the Rebbe Rashab, the 5th Chabad Rebbe. So he one of his main achievements or greatest achievements was the founding of the yeshiva Tomchit Mimim. Until what year was it? It was Tafresh. Yeah, he passed away in Tafresh Tzaddik, but I'm trying to remember. Somewhere in the beginning of the 1900s. he established a yeshiva called Tomchei Temimim. Up until then, there was no particular specific Chabad yeshiva. And he created this yeshiva, and nobody really understood why, but there were tremendous Torah scholars, but his real emphasis was on the study of Hasidic philosophy and the ways of Hasidism, and to imbue within these kids a strong connection with God.
Where was it located?
Originally, it was in the city of Lubavitch, and then it moved.
Russia?
That's in Russia, yeah. It moved around from Russia to, at a certain point, they were in Warsaw or Plotzk. They moved different places, but and there were branches also in other places. But one generation later, when learning and studying and practicing Judaism became outlawed, everyone understood now the magnificent foresight that he had, which was that these kids now went with a strong and a burning passion to make sure that Judaism would not die. And it is thanks to them that Judaism in Eastern Europe did not die. Many of them were killed. Many of them spent years in the gulags, but Judaism survived. Let's talk about his foresight. He actually hated Kaiser Wilhelm with a passion. He hated Kaiser Wilhelm, and actually, one time he was, I forget if it was in Vienna or if it was in Berlin, was somewhere, and Kaiser Wilhelm was coming out to the public, and there were thousands of people there, and the Rebbe Rashab was in the audience together with his son. They were on travels, and he was there. He went on many different travels, and he was there together with his son, the previous Rebbe. And at a certain point, when the Kaiser came out onto the balcony or wherever it was, the Rebbe Rashab was staring him down, to the point that the security came over and they asked him to leave. He said, "What's wrong with me being here? There's thousands of people here. Why can't I be here?" And they took him and they threw him out. Years later, when World War I began, which was the direct prelude to World War II, the Rebbe Rashab turned to his son and he said, "Remember then when we were standing in the audience and I was staring him down?" This was years earlier. He said, at that point already, he was beginning to come up with the idea of creating a world war. And I was trying to manipulate him, basically, and intimidate him, and in the hopes of diminishing some of his plan. The Rebbe Rashab also, he was once staying in a hotel, and they were walking by. I've heard two versions of the story. I'll say the way that I heard it the first time. They were in a hotel and they were walking past one of the ballrooms, and he hears there's an orchestra that was practicing for for some show that they were going to be playing, a concert, and he's walking by and he hears the lead soloist. I don't know if it was. I heard once that it was a soloist, a singer. I heard once that it was a soloist, the violinist, who was the star of the show. Anyways, he was playing a particular piece, and at a certain point, the Rebbe Rashab said he missed the note, and he continued walking. So his son, who was there with him, this is the way I heard the story the first time. His son, who was there with him, went over to to this violinist, and he said, "Did you miss a note in the thing?" And he said, "Yeah, but how do you know?" He says, "I don't know. I was walking by with my father, and he said you missed a note." He says, "There is no way anyone could have picked that up." So he wanted to speak with him, and he asked him, "Are you familiar with this piece?" He said, "No." He said, "How did you know?" He said, "Something wasn't right, and I could tell that there was a certain note that you missed." And the guy says, "You're right." And I wasn't able to get into the right mood. The energy, well, I wasn't able to get into it, and I wasn't able to hit that note. And the Rebbe rashab asked him, so how do you make sure that doesn't happen in concert? He says, in concert, that never happens because the energy of the crowd will pull it out of it.
So what does that have to do with
Nothing. I'm just telling stories. Okay. So, in our generation as well, when the Rebbe established the shlichus, the outreach movement, sending emissaries throughout the world, even in Billings, Montana, as we were speaking before, to open Chabad centers and bring the spirit of Judaism even to the most distant and challenging of places. Yes, we are not persecuted by the Russian authorities, but perhaps we are being persecuted by assimilation, which may be even more dangerous. And it was these students of Temchet Mimim who were trained in this special way, who are answering the call with boundless dedication. The unique education of Temchet Mimim has proven itself at the most crucial moments in Jewish history. And you know what they say? The opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is apathy. To gain a glimpse into the spiritual world that the Rebbe Rashab was imparting through Temchet Mimim Yeshiva, we're going to read in a minute a conversation that he had with Sigmund Freud. There was a very famous meeting that they had with each other, the Rebbe Rashab and Sigmund Freud.
Is this true or is this just
This is true. This is written down by his son, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. What came out of that meeting is not as well publicized, and I don't want to quote it because I'm not remembering it exactly. But it was the winter of 1903, and he was not very healthy, and his holy hands would tremble. And the doctors couldn't find anything. And so he traveled to Vienna to meet with Professor Sigmund Freud, and I believe he made a psychoanalysis of the Rebbe Rashab. And he was deeply intrigued by this meeting. And Freud was, yes. And let's read a little glimpse of it with source number one. Mitch, would you like to read for us source number one? This is from Likutei Diburim, the writings of the previous Rebbe, who was the son of the Rebbe Rashab.
Professor Freud asked the Rebbe, what is Chassidut? The goal of Chassidut is for the mind to instruct the heart on which it ought to desire, and for the heart to apply what the mind understands, answered the Rabbi. How is this accomplished? Asked Freud. The mind and heart are two very separate entities. The Rabbi replied, the task of Chassidut is to bridge these two worlds, or at least connect them with electric and phone cables, so that the light of the mind may reach the heart. Rebbe added, after postscriptum, I can say that Chassidim.
I recall we discussed something earlier, and I pointed out that it sounded very much like Freud's theory of id, ego, and superego. You remember that?
I remember that discussion, but I don't remember what it was that we were talking about.
Well, the id is desire,
Right.
base desire. The ego is conscious, conscious. And the superego is basically your moral sense that keeps the id in check.
Right.
We're making today, we don't remember there was some type of something we were studying, and I thought it sounded very much like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Much of today's psychology, psychoanalysis, and everything can be found in the book of Tanya from the Alter Rebbe, which is from the late 1700s, predating most of modern psychology. Everything can be found in the Torah. So the this statement really crystallizes everything, the entire Hasidic approach. So a lot of people think that Hasidus is all about emotions and dancing, smiles and enthusiasm, but Hasidus really is about philosophy, is about connecting the mind and the heart. First, understanding, learning, contemplating, and bringing that into that intellect and that understanding of God and that understanding of the superiority of the spirit over the matter, of the mind over the heart and body. And the heart is our job is to make our heart understand that which our brain knows. So, on the one hand, our heart and our brain are two very different things. But on the other hand, there is a very deep connection with them. And the purpose is to send the messages from the brain through practice and through learning more. And this is what we spend our entire lives reading old bookshelves to gain a stronger understanding of God and what God wants of us, and to train our hearts to feel that way as well. So,
Fascism started as a reaction against
Shav Tzvi,
over intellectualism of traditional Torah studies, Talmud studies.
the way I'll answer that, and you'll tell me if it's answering your question, is that the crux and the epitome of Torah of scholarship at that time was to exercise the brain and to focus on one's studies and to forget about the world. Hasidus' approach is very much approach on intellect and understanding, but the purpose of that is to change the way you feel and to change the way you act and the way you deal with the world. The Hasidim and the Rebbes placed a strong emphasis on also the simple people, or specifically the simple people, and they would walk around the marketplaces and telling stories from the Talmud to women and children to arouse within them a love for God and a connection with God. Hasidus places a strong emphasis on serving God in the workplace. That the world and God are not two separate things. Your mind and your heart and actions are not two separate things. And we're not trying to run away from the desires of our body. We're trying to channel our body and use it as a tool for our divine service. Can you guys hear us?
No, can't hear the question.
No? Okay.
So sounds like you're saying that Hasidum rabbis, Talmud, were kind of eluded.
They were, and it was very clear. It wasn't. It was one of the things that they hated about the Hasidim is that they were there standing on their pedestals, and the simple people would come in and kiss their feet and be like, they there was a great chasm. I shouldn't say great. It was a very ungreat chasm, but a huge chasm between the learned and the simple. And the Hasidim came and they said the broken words of Psalms from the simple tailor who can barely read is just as precious to God as your 7 hours of Talmud study a day. And they couldn't handle that.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay. Okay, source number 2. This is a beautiful, beautiful story from the childhood of the Rebbe Rashab. Chaim, would you like to read for us source number 2?
As children in the presence of the Samech Tzaddik, the Rebbe Rashad, and his brother Rebbe Zalman Aaron Raza would play Rebbe and Chassid as Raza was older than Rebbe Rashad by a year and a half, he would sit in the chair as Rebbe, and the Rebbe Rashad would act as the Kassi preparing for an audience with the Rebbe. Mimicking the questions Hasidim would ask, which were of both personal and philosophical nature. The Rebbe Rashad asked Raza, "What is a Jew?" After furrowing his brow and thinking, Raza answered that a Jew is fire. If so, asked the Rebbe Rashad, "why am I not burned when I touch it?" Raza replied, "because you are also fire, and when fire touches fire, it is not burned."
Beautiful, very deep, and we can spend weeks unpacking that. But these were little kids. And now, one of my favorite stories of the of this game that they would play. Zalman, would you like to read for us source number 3?
My father-in-law, the Rebbe, once told the story
So
of
this is, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt for a second. This is the Rebbe Menachem Mendel Schneerson, saying a story that he heard from his father-in-law, the previous Rebbe, about his father, the Rebbe Rashab, who is the subject of today's class.
my father-in-law, the Rebbe, once told the story of his father, the Rebbe Rashad, which happened during the lifetime of the Samach Tzaddik. When the Rebbe Rashid was a child of 5 years old, he was playing with his older brother, Rabbi Zalman Aran. Since both of them were raised in a home where discussion of the Rebbe-Hasi relationship was very common, they decided to play a game of Rebbe and Hassad. The older brother, Rabbi Zalman Aran, played the role of Rebbe, and the Rasid assumed that of the Hasid. Raza sat down on a chair and put on a hat like that of a Rebbe. The Rashid, playing the part of Hasid, entered the Rebbe's room and requested a tikkun, rectification for a particular shortcoming. This past Shabbos, he said, I ate nuts, and only after I finished them did I remember that the altar rabbi writes in his siddur that it's preferable to refrain from eating nuts that require shelling on Shabbat. Raza answered immediately with advice. Begin praying from a siddur, not by heart. This is your tikkun, rectification. Rashi responded, your life will not help, and you are not a true Rebbe. The Rebbe asked why. I gave you good advice. Rashid answered, a Rebbe first lets down a sigh of commiseration, and only then does he give advice. You didn't show me any compassion, and therefore you are not a Rebbe. And
wow. Isn't that an incredible lesson? An incredible lesson in just listening and empathizing with people.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
What does that have to do with Purim?
What does that have to do with Purim? You have to look in the context over there, and you'll find it.
are we talking? We're talking about Purim?
No, this talk was said on Purim in 1960. So you wanted to know what's the connection to Purim. So everyone was bringing out a point over there that the story added to. So when you're listening, first listen, and then afterwards say what you're gonna say. Okay, let's look at two more stories that the Rebbe told about the Rebbe Rashab, the lessons that the Rebbe learned from him. So in the Torah reading of last week's Torah portion, it was my Bar Mitzvah Parsha, we have source number 4, what happened in the beginning of the Torah portion. Baruch, would you like to read for us source number 4?
God appeared to him, to Avram, in the plains of Mamre, while he was sitting at the entrance of the tent in the heat of the day.
Okay. Concerning the 20th of Mar Cheshvan, the birthday of the Rebbe Rashab, the Rebbe Rayatz, which is the previous Chabad Rebbe, related an incident with the Rebbe Rashab that took place when he was a child of 4 or 5 years old, on the Shabbat when the Torah portion of Vayera was read. The Rebbe Rashab came to his grandfather, the Tzemach Tzedek, to receive a blessing for his birthday, and he burst into tears, saying, why did God appear to Abraham, our forefather, and not to me? The Tzemach Tzedek answered him, when a righteous Jew at the age of 99 decides that he must circumcise himself, he is deserving that God should appear to him. Bottom of page number 4, a lesson for every child. As we have often discussed, the lesson in divine service that can be learned from this story. All the stories of our Rebbes that we know, and especially those that they themselves chose to publish, contain guidance for every individual. We will now consider another point in the story. The Rebbe Rayat specified when relating the story that the Rebbe Rashab had been a child of 4 or 5 years old at the time. The words of a Jewish leader, especially those said in public and later printed at his instruction, are certainly deliberate and exact. Therefore, it must be that this detail is not only meant to show the greatness of the Rebbe Rashab, that even as a very young child, he was pained that God did not reveal himself to him, to the point that he wept about it. Rather, this detail too carries a lesson in divine service for all of us. It follows that although this story contains many lessons for all people, there is also a primary lesson meant even for those of the same age, a child of 4 or 5 in the literal sense. But the lesson is that it is possible to educate even a small child, to demand with sincerity and even tears that God should reveal himself to him just as he revealed himself to Abraham. This is a long one. Should we split it in two? Joan, would you like to read for us the beginning of... Actually, you know what? I think I'm just going to say this.
Go for it.
I'm going to just say this in short outside in the interest of time. Maimonides writes about bringing a small child to learn, to toil, and to understand Torah or whatever you want to teach them. That if you're going to explain to them that if they're going to learn this, then they will be well educated and they will have a great connection with God and people will respect them and call them rabbi, these kids are not going to go for it. So when a child is young, you first have to bribe them with sweets and with candies. And then they're going to learn because they want to get the prizes. Then as they get older, you make the toys more expensive, like clothing and more expensive toys. And then as the kid grows even older, you use it to boost his ego. And then at a certain point, the child will be able to understand that all of this was just side benefits, and the true greatness and the true wonder of learning is the connection with God that he got from learning Torah and the knowledge that he has amassed and what he has become. And at that point, it is appropriate to wean them off of the prizes and off of the toys, that they should be learning Torah for the sake of learning Torah and not for ulterior motives. And this is what it says in the Talmud, that always you should teach someone in a way that is not for the sake of the learning itself, because through learning, not for the sake of learning, they will come to learning for the sake of learning for itself. Continuing on page number 7, a child can also love God. Maimonides writes at length about how a young child should be taught. They need to be encouraged with things that appeal to them at that age. Study and I will give you nuts and the like, because due to their youth and the weakness of their understanding, they cannot yet grasp the value of true goodness. Here, however, we have spoken about expecting children to be moved and affected deeply, not by material reward and the like, but by the question, why does God not reveal himself to them? This means that children must be educated with the awareness that godliness is part of their life, something they genuinely care about, to the point that they are pained that God does not reveal himself to them as he did to Abraham. Page number 8. If not for the incident that occurred with the Rebbe Rashab, we would not have been able to know whether such a feeling could exist in any Jewish child. Since by nature children are drawn, as Maimonides notes, to physical pleasures, we would have assumed that they can only be motivated by material things that appeal to them. But once this incident took place with the Rebbe Rashab, and especially since his son, the Rebbe Rayat, publicly told the story and instructed that it be printed, it is clear that through this they revealed and paved a new path in education. From now on, with proper education, it is indeed possible to transcend the natural limits of children's inclinations and accustom them to desire spiritual things to the extent that they should develop a profound longing that God should reveal himself to them. And if we see a Jewish child who does not feel distressed that God has not yet revealed himself to them, this is not because they are incapable of such a feeling, but because their teacher has not spoken to them from the heart and didn't really mean it. opening the channel. How can you tell me there? This is going to be the question that's fueling the next part. Is how could you tell me that any little kid can achieve this level? It's very simple and obvious to see that the Rebbe Rashab was very special, and he was a genius of a kid, and he was a holy kid, and he was the son of the Rebbe. So just because he was able to come to this level doesn't mean that every kid can, or each and every one of us, even himself. So there's a beautiful story that the Rebbe is going to say over here. This can be understood in light of what is known about the concept of opening a channel. When someone first exerts great effort in a particular matter, he thereby opens a channel and draws that quality into the world. Once it exists within the world, it no longer requires the same degree of effort for others to access it. I'm going to share first this story, and then we're going to share something else, which I believe is the case. Page number 9. This applies not only to matters of spiritual refinement or special abilities, but also matters of understanding and comprehension. There is a well-known story about Rabbi Yosef Karo, the author of the Beit Yosef. He toiled intensely to understand a certain matter in the Torah, and after much effort, he finally grasped it. Later, he was walking into the study hall, and he saw these two people who were studying. They were much, much more simple than he was. And they were studying the same topic. And they had the question and immediately offered the same explanation that he had reached only after tremendous exertion. This troubled him deeply. Until he was told, and according to one version, the saintly Arizal told him, that once he had already drawn this understanding into the world, it became accessible to others without the same struggle. That he had invented this new idea, and once the idea existed and he had brought it out of the hidden and into the revealed, it now is accessible to others, and people can come up with that idea on themselves, even if they're not on his standing. Isn't there also a story, Thomas Jefferson, not Thomas Jefferson. I'm thinking.
Are you thinking about Thomas Jefferson, right?
No, go ahead.
Thomas Jefferson, right? Here lies the Declaration of Independence. The author of some other something of Virginia bill of religious liberty, statute of freedom, and religious freedom, and founder of Virginia. And the guide will say, but nothing about being president. And the tour guide will say, see how modest he was? The tour guide is wrong. Those things were all things that he just self-created and just existed for. Whereas being president was just a job. All the job, but the job. And in the Enlightenment, of which Thomas Jefferson was probably the premier example, the act of creation, creating something, was seen as the highest good. So he put the things that he created. When he was president,
there are other presidents
before
too.
and presidents after, but there will never be another author of the Declaration of Independence.
Right.
So it wasn't modesty, it was things that he thought were the most important.
Right. Who created the light bulb?
That is,
Thomas Edison.
well, not exactly.
Okay, go on.
Thomas Edison invented the first practical light bulb. That would stay lit for a long time.
Right.
But there were others before who invented light bulbs, but they would burn out very quickly, like in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
He came up with the filament. That
right. But I don't remember if it was about the light bulb or about something else. There was some invention that someone came up with, and he worked very hard on it. And then in another part of the world, I think, shortly thereafter, there was someone else who, without trying so hard, invented the same thing as well. Am I remembering wrong? I'm probably remembering wrong. But the concept here is that once you've brought it into the world of ideas, it's now accessible.
Well, there were inventions that were created independently. For example, calculus, right? The Leibniz and
I was Newton. Newton, yes. They both invented calculus at the same time. Newton generally gets credit for it because he published it first, but Leibniz probably came up with it first. But they were completely independent. They
Right.
just happened to be two geniuses working on the same problem in different
Right.
countries.
So these are two geniuses. Over here, we're talking about someone who should not have had the mental capacity to come up with the answer that Rabbi Yosef Karo came up with. Yet once Rabbi Yosef Karo had introduced that explanation into the world of ideas, it was now possible even for someone of a lower standing and stature to come up with it. So the point over here is that since this happened to the Rebbe Rashab, it could be that children before him were not capable of it. But once he did it, he now brought it into the world that it's possible for children. Sorry?
It was in the Zeitgeist. Zeitgeist.
What's that?
Zeitgeist refers to the overall cultural, intellectual atmosphere. Part of the culture now, right?
Right.
Theory of relativity is in the Zeitgeist. Now, you and I won't understand it, but we know it's out there, it's something, and it's part of it.
Right. It's been done before.
Yeah. And it's
Here's a good example.
It's just part of our culture every day that no one really thinks about because it's just accepted by everyone. It's part of normal course of life.
Right. There's a good example that just came to me. I think it is. Wait, what? Oh no. I'm sorry, Joan. I just realized that you got kicked out. Are you back in now?
I'm back in. I don't know what happened. It just went off.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
What is it? The 5-minute mile? No, 5 minutes.
4 minutes.
The 4-minute mile. It was never possible, never possible, never possible. And then one guy did it, or lady, I don't remember who. And then since then,
Jim Ryan.
No,
Patterson.
Oh, yeah?
and since then, I don't remember who it was, but since then there were many people who did it.
Yeah.
Why? Is it physically possible or not? Once someone else did it, now I know it's possible. So we can do it.
What was the predecessor thing?
Yeah.
Roger.
Roger B.
Yeah, Roger.
Okay, page number 10, another story.
American? English.
Rebbe's opened a new channel in the field of education with regard to the children's relationship with God. They make it possible to educate Jewish children to yearn for spirituality, not for the sake of reward, but because such things become part of their lives, to the point that they weep over the fact that God does not reveal himself to them as he did to Abraham. In a similar vein, they also opened a new channel regarding interpersonal relationships. This too emerges from the story about the Rebbe Rashab during his childhood. Joan, would you like to read the story?
Sure.
When he
Oh,
was 4
no.
years old.
When he was 4 years old, a tailor once brought to his home a garment he had sewn for the Rebbe's mother. While the garment was being examined, the young child innocently pulled a piece of fabric out of the tailor's pocket. The tailor was embarrassed and began to explain that he had forgotten about the leftover piece. After the tailor left, the Rebbe's mother reproved her son, telling him that because of what he had done, the tailor had been shamed. When the boy heard this, he burst into bitter tears. A few weeks later, he approached his father, the Rebbe Maharash, and asked what one must do to atone for the sin of publicly shaming another person. His father asked why he was asking, but the child only replied that he wished to know without saying what had happened. When his mother later asked him why he had not told his father the whole story, he answered, "Is it not enough that I have already sinned by embarrassing someone? Must I also transgress by speaking gossip and slander?"
Isn't that powerful? He would have, if he would have told his father, his father would now also know that the tailor tried to steal a piece of fabric. Thank you, John. Crying for someone else's feelings. On initial examination, this instance of shaming another person does not seem to have been a particularly serious offense. The account specifies the Rebbe Rashab pulled the piece out innocently, meaning unintentionally. And moreover, it was not done in public, only his mother was present. Nevertheless, as soon as he heard that the tailor had been embarrassed, it affected him so deeply to the point of bitter weeping. This shows that his distress did not stem primarily from the fact that he himself had caused the embarrassment and therefore might deserve punishment. He knew it was innocent. He knew his mother was the only one there. He wasn't about to get slapped. He wasn't crying because he was scared his parents would punish him, but from the very fact that the fellow Jew had suffered shame. For this reason, he also refused to tell his father what had happened, even though withholding the reason for his question might have seemed to border on disrespect towards his father. Moreover, even if he had told him, it would have been only for the purpose of correcting his misdeed. Yet he could not bear to talk about something that drew attention to something negative about another Jew in any form whatsoever. Since this story has been told to us with the emphasis on the fact that the Rebbe Rashab was only 4 years old at the time, it serves as proof that it is indeed possible to educate every Jewish child, even at that young age, to feel and act in a similar way. That's so interesting. Sometimes when Leah or Chana will hurt each other, and then let's say Leah will hurt Chana, and then I'll pick her Chana up to calm her down, Leah will burst out crying. Or sometimes the other way around. If Leah hurts Chana, if Chana hurts Leah and I pick up Leah, then Chana will burst out crying. And now I always get upset. Like, you're the one who hurt her. And now I have to comfort you. Like that's what is it? It's like they're gaslighting already from 3 and 4 years old. Like, you're the aggressor. You're not the victim.
When she cried.
I'm sorry, Rabbi, but
Is she crying because she regrets what she did to her sister, or is she crying because Daddy is home and her sister?
So I always used to think that it's because they're crying because the other kid is getting attention. But now I'm starting to think maybe they're crying because they just feel so bad that they hurt their sibling.
What did you ask?
You ought to ask them why.
Crying?
I always used to just get upset. Like, why are you crying? I have like one crying kid ready to deal with because you bashed her up. Now I have to deal with 2 crying kids. But this is such a different perspective. This is such a different perspective.
This is beautiful, this perspective.
That's what I'm telling you. Why are you crying?
Yeah. That's what I'm going to do next time this happens.
Find out if you're crying.
And I'll let you guys know.
That's what you did to her sister.
Okay.
But Daddy is paying attention to the other one.
I thought so too, yeah.
Okay.
Be an interesting.
A very interesting conversation, especially that they're 3 and 4 years old.
Yeah, I'd be very interested in hearing about that. From a psychological point.
Right. We'll see. Crying without delay. The lesson from this is to educate our children to have such great sensitivity for others to the point that even at the age of 4, they should already react with heartfelt emotion to the point of tears if they realize that they have caused someone embarrassment. As in the case of the Rebbe Rashab, the moment he was told that what he had done amounted to shaming another person, there was no need for anyone to explain anything to him. He immediately burst into tears. In the same way, a child should be educated so that when he is told that his actions constitute shaming another person, he instinctively reacts with sincere tears. And even when the situation is like the one described here, when it did not occur publicly and concerned only a small piece of cloth whose ownership might even be debatable, right? It could even be that this piece of cloth, which was the offcuts from the fabric, does belong to the tailor and was done unintentionally. The child should be raised with such sensitivity that the matter troubles him deeply enough to bring him to tears. Education by example. In order to be able to educate our child in this way, we must serve as a living example and conduct ourselves accordingly. Page 13. One might argue, what difference does it make how the parents behave? Children should accept the truth regardless. Oh, I heard such a good line recently, which I think is basically bringing this out. Don't worry that your children aren't listening to you. Worry that they're watching you.
Yeah.
There's a story. There was a guy, and he comes to the rabbi. He says, "Rabbi, I don't know what to do. My kid doesn't listen to me." He says, "What do you mean?" He says, "I come to synagogue, and I tell him not to talk, and he talks during the prayers. And the rabbi said, no, he's listening to you very well. He's watching you exactly. And when he's going to be your age, he's also going to be talking with his friends and telling you not to talk, telling his kids not to talk. Since this is the teaching of the Rebbe Rashab or of his successor, the Rebbe Rayatz, isn't that enough, regardless of the parents' conduct? The answer to this is that we clearly observe that parents' behavior has a direct influence on their children. Therefore, if we wish to instill such sensitivity in our children, we must make sure that we ourselves live by it, that we are exceedingly careful not to shame another person, even in a small or private matter, just as the story of the Rebbe Rashab. When the father behaves in this way, it makes an impression on the child. The same applies to the verse, you shall teach them to your children, which the sages interpret as referring also to students. Teachers must also serve as a living example because a teacher's conduct shapes the children they educate. We should not be like Aristotle. You know the famous story of Aristotle? Aristotle's student once saw him acting in a very depraved manner. Some say he was eating a live rabbit, or a raw rabbit, or something immoral. At any point, they accosted him. And they said, Aristotle, the great teacher, is behaving in such a manner. And he said, there's Aristotle in the classroom and there's Aristotle in the market. No? Look it up. And this is exactly what Hasidus is coming to fight against. That there's no separation between your intellect and your actions. Your actions must follow your intellect. Teachers must also serve as a living example because a teacher's conduct shapes the children they educate. Even if the teacher is a great scholar and has their own reasoning for behaving in a certain way, they must remember that their students are unaware of their complex considerations. They see only the teacher's outward behavior, and the teacher must therefore conduct himself in a manner from which the students can emulate. Finish off with a story that Rabbi Eli Sandler from Moscow relates in his book, The Struggle and the Victory. And he says, here in Moscow, I met a middle-aged Jew, an ordinary Jew who was a factory manager. Suddenly, from one day to the next, he changed his entire attitude. He began wearing a yarmulke and tzitzit. He began observing all the mitzvahs and praying 3 times a day and keeping Shabbos. And I asked him what happened. And he said, you see, there's a young man who works for me, a Jewish kid, and he is a good worker. It was a sewing factory, and he sets up the loom and makes everything go. There was one week, it was in the winter, and the Fridays were short days. And I was always, he says, I was always worried that he might be arrested while working for me, this Jewish kid, because he keeps Shabbos. And in those days, if a Jew was Shabbos, they got arrested. And he said, I because I felt bad for him. He was a young guy with many mouths to feed. And I let him keep his job, even though he wasn't working on Shabbos, knowing that he could get into big trouble for it. And I might have also gotten into some trouble for it. One time, the weaving on the loom was almost finished. It was Friday, the day he always went home early. But if he did not stay to set up the loom for the next day's work, the other workers would have nothing to do on Saturday. It was time to speak with him. I approached him first thing in the morning and pressed him to stay until he will complete his portion, promising him that once he finished this batch, he could take the entire Shabbat off from work with no problems. But he refused. When it was time for him to leave, he set aside his work right in front of me, and he said, I will never work on Shabbat. You may fire me if you wish. And he left. This troubled my mind. Here is a young man, poor and destitute, yet he is willing to sacrifice his livelihood for Shabbat. And I, already older and under no obligation to support anyone, have a comfortable income. So why am I desecrating Shabbat? At that moment, I decided to leave my job, to do tshuva, to turn my life around, and to act like a proper Jew. Key points. At the age of 4, the Rebbe Rashab approached his grandfather in tears and asked why God revealed himself to Abraham but not to him. The Rebbe explained that it was due to the merit of circumcision that Abraham performed at age 99, which earned him the revelation. This story conveys a powerful lesson. Every Jewish child can desire and yearn for a personal revelation from God. It is both possible and our responsibility to educate children to cultivate this yearning. This event opened the channel for generations, granting every child the ability to experience a true longing for divine revelation. From another story about the Rebbe Rashab, we learned that this channel of sensitivity was not only for matters pertaining him and God, but also applies to interpersonal matters. When the Rebbe felt deep sorrow that a tailor had been embarrassed and distressed despite having committed no wrongdoing, it teaches that every Jewish child can be educated to live with awareness, responsibility, and sensitivity toward the dignity of others. Takeaway. We should not underestimate the value of our children. Even at a very young age, children possess a great spiritual potential and a genuine desire to engage in spiritual matters. They can express and fulfill this potential through giving charity or helping those in need, reciting blessings over food, and participating alongside their parents in Shabbat prayers at the synagogue, among other ways. And children does not necessarily have to be only children. I'm not 4 or 5 years old anymore. This no longer applies to me. I missed the boat. No. Whether we're young on our spiritual journey or young on our physical journey, there's a lot of beautiful points to take away from this for each and every one of us. L'chaim. This Shabbos we will
L'chaim.
not be having services Shabbat morning. We will not be having Shabbat services this Shabbos morning. Next week, Tuesday, we're back on for the Talmud class. Next week, Wednesday, for the Wednesday class. And next week's Tuesday night for the Mensch Club. You saw the email, the text messages, and we're looking forward to seeing you guys there. What's the Mensch Club? We're going to be getting together on Tuesday evening with steaks and beer. And Susie, I need to get back to you about what we spoke last week. I will contact you shortly.
Okay, thank you, Rabbi.